Like a Seinfeld. Hey, we're on.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Late Night Happy Hour. Brian Kamenetzky, Andy Kamenetzky. Excited tonight to be joined by Bill Hanstock, the author of We Promised You a Great Main Event in Unauthorized WWE History. It came out in October. It's a lot of fun. If you are a wrestling fan, particularly, definitely want to pick this thing up. So we'll talk some wrestling. We'll talk a bunch of stuff today. Bill, how are you? Good to see you.
I'm good, thanks. I really appreciate you guys having me on. I'm looking forward to it. It should be fun on a big sports day and a day where absolutely nothing else happened in the world of news or politics.
Yeah, you know, Bill, there's something about us planning a show with you and the world getting politically insane. Because you were supposed to be on with us last Wednesday, and some might be old enough to remember last week when the Capitol was stormed, and we decided,
we call Insurrection Day.
Yes, and it's funny. Brian and I that day we were like, "What do we do about this show with Bill?" Because we were like, on one hand, we're not sure if we're going to even be doing a show. And then if we're going to do a show, we're thinking about tone and topicality, and we want to be able to have fun with you. On the other hand, we're like, we've seen Bill's Twitter feed. I think he has a lot to say on the topic.
Bill has thoughts. There's no question.
But then we ultimately decided it would be better just to roll the dice on the world still being around a week later. And having a little more freedom, although, as you said, some things happened today.
Yeah, I feel like it was the right decision last week.
It just feels like the phrase "off the top rope" shouldn't have come up during last week's show.
Yeah, and you never know if maybe Vince McMahon's going to show up at the Capitol building waving a flag too.
Yeah, does getting impeached? It's funny actually because there are these commonalities and connections with Donald Trump and Vince McMahon that we know we want to ask you about. But do you happen to know, with your expertise on the WWE, does getting impeached a second time get you removed from the WWE Hall of Fame? Like, do you know if that's in the bylaws?
Well, to date, the only things that have resulted in a temporary removal from the Hall of Fame are being on a leaked porn video or possibly a racist screed as part of a porn video. And then being put on trial for a long since gone cold murder case during which you're deemed too incompetent to stand trial due to dementia.
Those are three very specific circumstances.
So I mean, there's still 7 days left for Trump to do one of those two things,
or I would say for it to be discovered that he is involved.
He's definitely done all of those things.
Before we reveal because if you can tell us the backstory for some of those, I am immediately fascinated. But you mentioned being in a leaked porn video. And then being like in a racist leaked porn video. What if it's not leaked? If you just do it?
He's not on Twitter anymore, so he's got to do something to fill his time. You never know what the press room can be used for.
I mean, the odds do favor. I mean, just because there's only a week and there's only so much paperwork and times that you can convene, he's probably not going to get impeached for a third time. Before Joe Biden is sworn in, probably. I didn't say definitely.
I mean, I said he might call Raffensperger again. Like, you never know.
To paraphrase Curly in City Slickers, week's not over yet.
You just mentioned Raffensperger. Like, at some point, and I know this has to be very difficult if these are calls from the White House. These are calls maybe from the president's cell phone. Can you block the president's cell phone? Like, can you actually, can you get the White House blocked?
Of course. Why can't you?
You would think that, but like call 15, you'd be like, you know what? Let's get this thing blocked.
Yeah, I mean, but the problem is that he has so many phones at his disposal. He can just grab the nearest Secret Service agent and use that phone.
Yeah.
I don't think the Secret Service can decline to let the president borrow their phone.
I've seen enough movies where like FBI agents commandeer people's cars on the street. Like, FBI, I need your car, and like, and they take them, and like, you're right. I can't see that happening with like the phone. He is, the leader of the free world. It's a tough no.
Yeah.
Well, plus two, I mean, he is by all accounts a high maintenance fellow. And there probably is a certain point where you're just like, all right, you know what? In the grand scheme of things, if he wants my phone, I got to pick my battles because there have been so many others.
This is the least ridiculous thing he's asked me for all week.
But it's a little bit, I picture it a little bit like when my 2-year-old picks up my phone and just starts mashing the keys and like eventually texts people. You're just like, hey, that was the baby. Sorry about that.
Every single day near Trump must be just have the Rolling Stones killed. Just every day.
Excellent reference. Can you back up for a second before, like, who is the person who got accused of murder and went on trial and then was not deemed to stand trial because of all that?
Okay, that's Superfly Jimmy Snuka.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's actually a really sad story.
Yeah, it is. It's a very sad story. It's in my book. We Promised You a Great Main Event, out on HarperCollins now. Everywhere books are sold, audiobook, PDF. Any way you want to read it.
You a happy promotion point.
Yeah. In the early 80s, mid 80s, Jimmy Snuka was, by all accounts, in an abusive relationship with his girlfriend, Nancy Argentino. And she died under mysterious circumstances at a hotel that they were both staying at. Everyone in the press thought it was very fishy that Snuka was questioned, that he initially admitted to shoving her and then later took that story back, and then later told a completely different story of how she slipped and fell or whatever the story may have been at the time. Vince McMahon reportedly arrived at the police station, and a short time later, he and Snuka left free to go, and no charges were ever pressed against Snuka. And it was only through the diligent work of a handful of journalists that pushed really hard to have the case reopened, that very shortly before Snuka's death a few years ago, the case was reopened. He was officially charged with the murder of his girlfriend, and
and that part I do remember that.
At that time, he was in a nursing home. He was, by the account of his doctor, suffering from dementia or CTE or whatever it may have been. But the judge deemed him unable to stand trial, so the case was dismissed on those grounds. Snuka died a short time afterward. Now, as far as like getting removed from the Hall of Fame, it's an impossible thing to address because there's no physical Hall of Fame, but which is not unusual in sports. Like there's all sorts of local halls of fame and regional halls of fame and niche sports halls of fame that don't have a physical location. It's just some like file cabinet somewhere or a plaque on a wall at some, like if you go to Oakland Coliseum, there's all sorts of like, Bay Area or Oakland or East Bay Area wall of fame where there's like plaques on the wall, and that's not really a Hall of Fame. Anyway, so the only way to really judge whether someone has been removed from the Hall of Fame or not is to go to the Hall of Fame portion of the WWE.com website. And so for a period of time, I don't know if he's there at the moment, but for a period of time, Snuka was removed from that Hall of Fame.
I had forgotten how dark that story was. I probably should have asked about the porn movie instead. That was my
Hulk Hogan.
That was my bad.
It actually, that leads to a question that I plan to ask you about anyway, Bill. Like a lot of entertainment entities, the WWE has a lot of dark, pretty sordid history attached to it. These stories that we just mentioned, other stuff that's been pretty bad, whether you're talking about sexual harassment, murder, suicide, and yet it's managed to stay very popular. And, it's even at times seen its popularity grow. How do you, again, like I said, it's not unique to entertainment entities to have this, but how do you think the WWE in particular has managed to make that happen?
It's honestly, there's no easy answers for these questions, but I think you can just chalk it up to the callousness of the world in general, because the NFL is close to the NFL is close to the pro wrestling business in terms of being corrupt and vile and full of horrible people and run by the worst megalomaniacs in the world who are only looking out for themselves and don't give a shit about anyone underneath them. Same can be true of most major sports leagues. And the NFL, I would say the NFL in its history is like, I don't know if it's close to pro wrestling as an industry, but I think it's in the same ballpark. And it's the most popular thing pop culturally in our entire country. So, I mean, like, look at the movie industry and Harvey Weinstein and Brian Singer and like, it's it's I'm just laughing at the comment that just
but it's actually an interesting point though that's kind of the follow-up here.
But I just think I think part of it is pro wrestling has not by the standards of pro wrestling fans what they would perhaps like, but pro wrestling has adapted and evolved with the times as best as it is really capable of, at least given the people who are owning and operating it. And I think that it remains entertaining. It remains the capacity for payoff is much greater than with other sports because it is predetermined. So the nature of sports is so random that we have to come up with like pundits and talking heads to force a narrative upon the randomness of the athleticism of these athletes. Whereas while WWE doesn't do it very well very often anymore, it's still they're choosing what story they're telling and they're choosing the payoff of that story. Like you might hate Conor McGregor's guts, but he's probably not going to lose a lot of fights. Same with Floyd Mayweather. You pay every pay-per-view $100 to see, is this the guy that's going to beat Floyd Mayweather? And it isn't ever. But you pay for WWE WrestleMania, and maybe your guy is finally going to win the big one, and that payoff is going to be so worth it to you.
But like the point that Nathan Mark was making, that it's just he called it the best entertainment on TV by a mile. Like that matters. It's just. I remember. I mean, I stopped watching it, so I don't remember exactly when it was, but grew up in that sort of late, mid '80s, early '90s WWF at that time era, like the introduction of WrestleMania and the characters.
I hosted a WrestleMania party for the original one in '85. Like it was a big deal.
Right. And so we weren't I was 10. I knew it wasn't real then. It was still fun.
Yeah.
How much is it just that? Like it just is.
I don't appreciate this Bill guy.
I don't appreciate this
Bill
guy.
Sorry, you have to find this way out, Joey. Maybe you won't enjoy my book.
I mean, at least, Bill, in fairness to what Joey Jojo's saying, how about a spoiler alert? Like something to let the people know.
I should have given you a heads up.
You just run around telling people that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father too? Is that just sort of your jam?
That one's a little bit more. That one's a little bit more forgivable, I think.
But how much does that matter? Just like the sheer quality of the entertainment you get on television, because you talk about it in your book a lot. Like the McMahons, they recognize the value of TV and the way that TV was going to make this thing work earlier than most.
Yeah, I think they really Vince McMahon, the Vince McMahon that's currently running WWE, the Vince McMahon you're all familiar with, he had a vision for what he wanted to do, and he achieved that vision in spades. He nationalized and then globalized pro wrestling in a way that nobody had ever done before. He wanted to have it be syndicated everywhere. He wanted it to air on cable television at coast to coast. He wanted it to have it on networks, and he did that. And to the detriment of the territory system of pro wrestling that existed in the 1950s through the 1990s, he slowly put everyone out of business. And now he's finally got a large scale competitor, and that's good for business as well. He had a vision, he saw it through, and he made his version of professional wrestling in his own image, and he made it as big as it's ever been a couple of times, which is impressive too, because he had Hulkamania, which was a phenomenon which spurred the original WrestleMania. He had a really big lull and almost went to prison on federal charges, and then he happened
for people who don't remember what
94 the feds had been after him for quite some time because of all the steroids that everyone was using at that time, because that was the era of Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, and the huge freaks.
Didn't seem evident to me at all. I mean, those feds are pretty sharp.
But the feds at that point were like really on a tear of like a combination of, the war on drugs with the Reagan era, and then the advent of like trying to make United States sports a huge deal after the after communism had dissolved and those steroided athletes were no longer something that was
Cold War era. WWF was the best era of WWF. Oh my God!
But then, so Vince tried to get sent away on federal steroid trafficking charges. They did not stick. He walked. There was no conviction of anything. And then, that was a real low period for a lot of pro wrestling fans. Not a lot happening apart from Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, who are two of the greatest of all time, admittedly. But then he managed to, when WCW started putting the NWO together and really giving him a run for his money, WCW was on top for almost 2 years straight. They beat him every week in the ratings. And then he caught lightning in the bottle with the Attitude Era, and he stumbled into Steve Austin and The Rock, and reached probably greater heights than even the Hulkamania era, as far as like widestream coolness factor, widestream acceptability, popularity everywhere. Austin and The Rock are probably the two biggest pro wrestling stars that have ever existed anywhere, especially The Rock now, the biggest movie star period in the entire world. But Vince managed to do it a couple of times, is make pro wrestling the biggest it's ever been. And he's still doing it. Like WWE now, doing some of the lowest ratings that's ever done on television, as we understand the outdated metric of ratings,
right?
But the company is generating by exponential factors the most money it's ever generated in years, the most money it's ever generated ever for single years, just by the 10-year deal they signed with Fox, the new deal they signed with USA, the Saudi Arabia deal that people understandably feel bad ways about, the billions of views they rack up on YouTube, the billions of views they rack up on Twitter. They've diversified all of their revenue streams. It took them for 10 or 15 or 20 years, they were hilariously behind the times in terms of technology, in terms of social media platforms, that they would get dunked on constantly. And all of a sudden they got smart about everything, diversified all the revenue streams, and now they're making money hand over fist from all of these deals. And the ratings don't make a lot of their partners happy sometimes, but that's no longer the end all be all of what pro wrestling is
with most things. I mean, like kids just don't consume stuff like that anymore. They consume it. It's true with live sports. You talked about the Hulkamania era, the Attitude Era. You talked about The Rock. And what makes some of these guys pop? Because I haven't really watched wrestling for 30 years with any consistency, but I can go back and remember all of the dudes that I used to love and all that kind of stuff. And it kind of relates to some of the questions that we're gonna hit you with that readers are leaving, or watchers or viewers or whatever we call them are leaving. But like, what makes some of these guys pop? Why did Hogan pop? Why did The Rock pop?
Hogan popped because they found the perfect distillation of the early to mid 1980s attitude about masculinity, about patriotism, and about what's cool, but most importantly about what kids like. And they created this much larger than life personality. They had a formula with Hogan that worked extremely well, but the formula was not new. The formula was bring in a new guy, preferably a foreign monster, make him seem unbeatable, have him challenge Hogan. Hogan seems like he's going to lose, but then he beats the guy. The guy cycles out of the WWF.
He does the finger right when you think he's out.
Right.
Sleeper. It's a sleeper. He's sleeping. No, he's not. He's awake.
So that bring in the foreign heel thing, that was, that's been going on forever. Like that's part of the reason why the territory system was so beneficial to so many people is, you bring in a guy to Championship Wrestling from Florida, which Dusty Rhodes ran. You have, like bring in Bruiser Brody. This guy Bruiser Brody, he's going to kill Dusty. Maybe have Bruiser Brody actually beat Dusty, take the title. Then Dusty comes back, beats Bruiser Brody in the winner take all cage match. Then Bruiser Brody, can I cuss on this show? Or?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And Bruiser Brody fucks off to Japan for 2 years, and you don't see him in Florida again for a while. Like that was to the benefit of everyone. And then like you bring in like one man gang from Memphis, and you have Dusty fuck him up
soon
for a while.
Become Akeem the African Dream.
Correct, Akeem, yeah, from the deepest parts of Africa.
Yes,
that's right.
Not that deep.
Nothing problematic about that transformation.
Parts of South Africa.
So the formula wasn't new, but what was new was Hogan took over. He was the new top star after Bob Backlund. And Bob Backlund had been holding the title for, I believe, 7 years at that point. It was either 5 or 7 years.
He was a technical wrestler, Bill.
He was a technical wrestler. He was unbelievable. He was a champion amateur wrestler. But as far as the fans were concerned, he had no personality. He was squeaky clean, just the most white bread of white bread baby faces. And people were sick of him. They brought signs that said, like, kill Howdy Doody. They were really turning on the guy. They were rooting against the top good guy star in the company because he wasn't cool. There was nothing cool about Bob Backlund. And Superstar Billy Graham had come in. That's who Backlund won the title from. Superstar Billy Graham was the template for the Hulk Hogan personality. He was huge. He was tan. He was roided out to the gills. No, he had a physique that really wasn't seen very often at that time. And he talked like a movie star. He was big. He was bad. He was loud. He was entertaining. He was funny. And he was kind of cool. And that was a problem because you can't have the bad guys be cooler than the good guys at that point. So Bob Backlund was just uncool for years and years. So you start building Hogan up at that point, who is massive. He's bigger than everybody else in the company. He's got a better body than most of the other people in your company. He knows how to talk. He's got a huge personality. He's allegedly coked up all the time. He's just like, he's dynamic. He understands. He has a formula. And then he has the thing that no one else had done at that point, where at the end of a match, you think he's going to be put to sleep, but then he just comes back and he becomes impervious. So you're just putting on Front Street like, this is silly, this is goofy, but he's a real life superhero. And another part of that puzzle is you have Iron Sheik, the Iranian monster, during the Iran hostage crisis, beat Backlund to take the title, and then you have Hogan beat Sheik to be the new star, and then you're off and running. So
well, I mean, look,
Sheik's
I mean, let's be honest.
part of that.
No, there was never a greater threat to the sovereignty and sanctity of all we hold dear in America than the tag team of the Iron Sheik and Nikita Volkov, Nikolai Volkov. Like that was still one of the great threats that we ever faced as a nation.
Definitely.
God damn, I love that. so silly and so much fun. But like, so what did The Rock recreate out of that? What did John Cena recreate when they were able to sort of, as you say, kind of resurrect?
Yeah, I think that just like Hogan, the biggest things that come along always latch onto a moment in greater pop culture, greater zeitgeisty sort of stuff. The NWO caught on because people were tired of the good guy, of the squeaky clean good guy. And you got it's Hogan that's a bad guy now. That's a massive part of this formula.
Dyed his hair.
Yeah. Well,
that's how you do.
And you have a bunch of bad guys who are cool, who are way cooler than your good guys. And that's why the NWO caught on like fire in WCW. But while you've got that cool guy, fans cheering for the heel moment, you create the biggest villain that pro wrestling's ever seen in Vince McMahon, who becomes Mr. McMahon by screwing over Bret Hart and going on TV and saying Bret screwed Bret, when it's a real life thing that you're twisting, and you're building off of a really horrible thing that a real life person did to a person in real life that was really loyal to you, and everyone understands that this bad person did this bad thing for real. And then you have this villain make him take it upon himself to be like, I'm going to lean into this and just get everyone to hate me because of the real things I did in real life. It's almost like if Donald Trump was comfortable with, you know what? I'm just going to make everybody hate my guts, and I'm going to encourage them to hate me instead of try everything I can to get a certain subset of people to love me. And I'm only powered by that love. And the idea of people adoring me and worshiping me is the only thing that keeps me going. Vince McMahon is the inverse. And he's like, you know what keeps me going is people buying into what I'm doing, as opposed to, and what he wanted them to do was to boo him. So that was the easiest. I mean, not easy for everyone. Like, he's the perfect person to play that role, and he was great at it. So you have Vince McMahon make himself a villain as the owner of the company who did a horrible thing in real life for his real life company that he owns, and then start playing this character that wants to keep down the everyman working class hero in Steve Austin, who is an ass kicker,
what was the real thing? In case people aren't aware, what was the real life bad thing that Vince McMahon did?
Okay, so Bret Hart had been the on and off champion at the time of the Montreal Screwjob. Bret Hart was in his 5th reign as the WWF champion. Bret Hart had been with WWF for nearly his entire career at that point, apart from starting in Stampede Wrestling, which his father owned. But Bret Hart was like the most loyal person who'd ever worked for Vince McMahon. Basically, like he had been at the head of the company through this horrible down period after Hogan and Ultimate Warrior left. And then he was willing to recede to the background when they both came back. And then when they both flamed out again, he was once again given the mantle to go forward. So WCW wanted to come 95, 96 or so. WCW wanted to sign Bret Hart. His contract was coming up. And Bret didn't really want to go. They were offering him a lot of money. Vince McMahon said, I need you to stay here. I want you to be loyal to me. I'm going to offer you a 20-year contract as opposed to this whatever few year really high money contract that they're offering you. I'm going to give you a 20-year contract, and then you'll have a job for life here once you retire. I need you to stay here. So Bret re-signed with WWF. And then when WCW started kicking WWF's ass in the ratings, Vince went back to Brett and said, you know what? I have to go back on our deal, and I'm going to release you from your contract. If you want to sign with WCW, you can do it. The problem was twofold. One, Brett was the champion at that point and opted to take the big money deal from WCW that was now back on the table. So he signed with WCW, or he was going to sign with WCW once his contract was up in a few months. But he was the current reigning world champion in WWF at that point. The other problem is that at that time, the person that Brett was feuding with and the person that Vince McMahon wanted him to drop the title to was Shawn Michaels, who Bret Hart could not stand in real life because Shawn Michaels had spent all of the time that Bret Hart was on top politicking backstage, shit-talking everyone, getting in good with Vince to try and get himself more opportunities. Sorry. And had basically been a thorn in Bret's side and had done really awful stuff like go on live TV and insinuate that Bret Hart had slept with Sonny, Tammy Sitch, when actually it turns out Shawn had been sleeping with her, but he insinuated that on live television, and then Bret wasn't very happy about that because, you know, his wife is watching and has questions for him and things of that nature. But there was a lot of stuff that Bret didn't care for. He didn't care for the way that Shawn conducted himself, and he didn't care for the new D-Generation X attitude that Shawn was putting out on television. Bret was a traditionalist in pro wrestling, and he didn't really care for the Attitude Era that was coming down the pike. So basically, he and Vince were going back and forth on this for weeks and months of what Bret wanted to do. Because what Vince wanted to do was, I want you to lose the title to Shawn Michaels in Montreal, because Bret is Canadian. I want you to lose the title to him at Survivor Series 97 in Montreal. And Bret's contract was up like basically that night or that week. Bret said, what I want to do is I want us to either, you know, have a fuck finish, have a draw or whatever. You know, you have D-Generation X run in, have the Hart Foundation run in. There's no finish to the match. The next night, not in Montreal, not in Canada, on Raw, I'll forfeit the title, or you can hold the title up, or say that the ending was disputed, or whatever.
Don't make me do it in front of the Mounties.
Bret offered every solution that was possible on the table. I'll lose it to Shawn on this day. I'll lose it to this guy in Montreal. I'll lose it to that guy in Montreal. We can, you know, go to a draw in Montreal. We can do whatever. The only two things that Bret wouldn't do were lose to Shawn in Montreal, because he is a national hero, the national, basically just don't let me lose it at home. Don't let me lose in Canada to this guy I can't stand in real life. Right. That was his only ask.
Yeah, I don't think JWC 1341 is sympathetic to Bret Hart's argument here.
I wouldn't say he's unprofessional. Yeah, JWC 1341 saying that Bret's unprofessional. He offered a myriad of other compromises and solutions. But, you know, at the end of the day, the other awful part of this is Vince told him, okay, what we'll do is we'll get to this point in the match and everyone will run in and we'll do a double disqualification. And that'll be it, and we'll vacate the title. He agreed to it. He shook Bret's hand. Vince told him, he told everyone, and then the only people who knew were Vince, a couple of people backstage, and the ref, Earl Hebner, and then possibly Triple H. There's some question on that. But what ended up happening was they put the match together, and someone had actually warned Bret ahead of time. I don't remember who it was. Someone had warned Bret, though, backstage, like, don't let them get a submission hold on you because they can fuck you. There had been 2 or 3 other screw jobs in professional wrestling, very famous ones at that time, which the Montreal screw job now is retroactively like sort of negated because it was such a big deal. But they were warning Bret, like, don't get put in a compromising position. But Bret can hold his own. Bret is like legitimate. Like, Bret was always a better, like, legitimate wrestler than Shawn. Like, as it just in terms of like, if you try to put Brett in something, he will fuck you up. As opposed to like, I don't know if I can say that about Shawn Michaels. He probably can't.
So explain how this works. Like, you don't like. It's obviously the outcomes are predetermined, but the stuff that happens to get to the outcome isn't necessary.
So there's nowadays you pretty much have the whole match laid out. But at that point, it was mostly like you figure out the high points in the match, and then how you get to them, you just figure it out in the ring. You call it in the ring. But they had put together like, all right, you'll do this, then we'll fight for a while, then we'll do that, and we'll fight for a while, and then we'll get to this specific spot, and everyone knew that that was the time to run in. But what actually ended up happening was a few minutes into the match, Shawn goes to put Brett's finisher, the sharpshooter, on Brett, and he turns it over, and you can watch on the tape. He turns it over. Brett isn't in it for more than a second. He's already working to break out of it. He's not looking at anything other than than Shawn's leg, because he's going to grab the leg to break free of it. Shawn turns it over, and Earl Hebner, the ref, calls for the bell and sprints out of the ring. And they announce that Shawn Michaels has won because Bret Hart submitted. And at that point in time, if you'll remember, this was before Ken Shamrock came to WWF and taught pro wrestling audiences that a tap out is a thing, because pro wrestling audiences did not know about MMA back then. They did not know about tapping out. Mm-hmm. It was, you get put in a submission and either you drop the hand the 3 times like you guys are talking about, or the referee says to the timekeeper who rings the bell, and then the ring announcer announces that someone submitted.
So it was like the double. This reminds me of that scene in Braveheart when William Wallace thinks the nobles are going to come from around the corner. They wave the flags and the nobles just ride off because they all got castles in Scotland. So like that, it was doubly worse because not only did he lose in Canada in front of his home country, he submitted in Canada, which is like even more embarrassing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's why they called
it. And that, Vince McMahon was immediately at ringside, like when this was all going down. Brett spit right in his face, drew the letters WCW in the air as the show was going off the air, and destroyed a bunch of ringside monitors. They got backstage, and Vince and Brett went behind closed doors, and Brett knocked him out. And if you've never seen it, I can't strongly enough recommend Wrestling with Shadows, which is the documentary that was made. So by complete coincidence, a Canadian company with national funding had decided to make a documentary about a year in the life of a Canadian pro wrestler. And they chose Bret Hart because he was the most high-profile Canadian wrestler. For some reason, WWF gave them complete access to everything. And it just so happened that that was the year that he had the contract signed, reneged on, and then the screw job. So it was just supposed to be this documentary about a guy choosing to sign his last contract in pro wrestling. And it ended up becoming a document of one of the most important pivotal moments in pro wrestling history, with unprecedented access to all of it. So I if you've never seen Wrestling with Shadows and you're at least a little bit interested in pro wrestling, you have to watch it. It's an unbelievable documentary.
You had mentioned Donald Trump a few times during the show, but recently, the relationship between Vince McMahon and Donald Trump, it's been very open, very long time. Trump has hosted events at his casino. McMahon has been a big donor. When Vince McMahon launched the XFL, he noted that players would not be allowed to kneel. It was a very big Trump energy. One of the things that I think there's a few elements of that I think they're really interesting, but one thing that you brought up in your book is how there are a lot of similarities between these guys and a lot of differences, and those differences are kind of how they are two different sides of the same coin, and they're kind of each other's avatar in certain ways. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly an incredibly fascinating dynamic and dichotomy, because you have two megalomaniacs of varying degrees of psychopathy who are both driven by narcissism.
Varying degrees of high.
They're both so driven by narcissism and so driven by the pursuit of material wealth, but they're also both driven by the need for greater and wider acceptance, and the word is escaping me, legitimacy.
Okay.
So Vince McMahon, he set out to be the biggest pro wrestling promoter ever, but he also wanted to be so much more than that. He wanted to be a mover and shaker. He wanted, like, in the 80s, he tried to promote a Sugar Ray Leonard boxing match on pay-per-view, and it was a complete disaster, and he never tried to promote another boxing match. He tried to break into movies with No Holds Barred, and it was a critical disaster that by sheer force of Vince McMahon's will ended up turning a profit through all sorts of tricks that he pulled, including bundling the movie with a single Hulk Hogan tag team match on pay-per-view that ended up doing a greater box office than the box office of the movie did. Just all sorts of tricks he was able to pull out, but he always wanted to be more than, he wanted to be viewed as more than just a pro wrestling promoter.
Right.
And every year at WrestleMania, they, like, any time WWE ever has gotten coverage in mainstream press, like non-sports press, non-pro wrestling press, they can't get enough of it. They brag about it endlessly. All he wants is to be covered by everyone. All he wants is to be seen as more than just this carny pro wrestling promoter. A lot of people will agree he's like one of the greatest geniuses in terms of promotion that's ever existed. To
be fair, Donald Trump.
Right.
To be fair to Donald Trump, he is really good at marketing.
Yeah, he's great. Donald Trump's best ability is, until his presidency, his greatest ability was to just change the narrative to fit what he wanted it to be, and market himself in a specific way.
He understands, and not to interrupt you, but Donald Trump understands media better than any president's, at least of my lifetime. I think his weakness is that he is as big of a slave to media, and he is both the prime driver and prime consumer, and you
don't want to be both,
right? I don't think he can run the con, but he can't remove himself from entirely. But it doesn't change the fact he really understands how this stuff works.
Yeah. The differences between the two are, all Vince has ever wanted is to be seen as legitimate, as a self-made success, which he is, but he wants to be recognized as that wider than just the pro wrestling and sports world. He wants to be a paragon of self-made success and brilliance by people outside of the sports and pro wrestling realm. That's all he's ever wanted. And all Donald Trump has ever wanted is to be seen as actually self-made and a big, strong guy.
Yeah.
And Vince McMahon is, if nothing else, a big, strong guy. I mean, he's gone downhill a little bit in recent years in terms of his physique, but he was a huge, jacked, strong, tough guy, the epitome of machismo. He invented that swagger walk. And knowing what I know of Donald Trump, I know that Donald Trump looks at Vince McMahon and he's like, I wish that could be me. Vince McMahon literally grew up in a trailer park with an abusive stepfather and mother, and didn't know his actual dad, who was successful, until he was like in high school. And Donald Trump was given everything in life. Vince McMahon had to scrape and claw for most of his childhood, and then he had to scrape and claw to earn the favor of his father, and then had to scrape and claw to wrest the company away from his father, and then had to scrape and claw to avoid his industry and his company dying many times over.
Which commonalities.
Right.
I mean,
but Vince has actually made something from basically nothing.
oh yeah.
And has created stuff that has been entirely his, and has turned the entire industry into something that he conceived of. Whereas Donald Trump has failed at basically every venture.
His comebacks in a lot of ways have been either enabled or smoke and mirrors,
yes.
as opposed to Vince McMahon, who really has built these legitimate empires or rebuilt them.
Yeah. And Trump just wants to be a success and isn't. And just by virtue of being rich and through no fault of his own, being rich his whole life and having everything given to him, and only in the past couple months being told no, and being told, it's possible there may be potential consequences for your entire life now that he's almost 80. Now he's seeing stuff, as opposed to Vince McMahon, who has come at it from the opposite side and had to harden himself and had to lift weights. And Donald Trump doesn't believe exercise is beneficial.
No.
But he's still drawn to big,
right.
But he's still drawn to like big, strong guys and masculinity and toughness.
For sure.
So they're the two halves of each other, and they drive each other. And Vince, there's no coincidence or mistake that Linda McMahon was in the cabinet, and Vince McMahon's wife was in Trump's cabinet, and now runs his biggest super PAC and donated more money than she's ever donated to anything else to this super PAC. Some of that money has to be joint McMahon money, I would imagine, and helped fund the January 6th march. There's no coincidence of that. They've been friends with Trump forever, been some of his biggest supporters, but it's just such a, like you said, a yin and yang thing, where it's like they're so similar, but the thing that drives both of them is the opposite. And they sort of, I believe they look at each other. And I believe Vince looks at Donald Trump. I think Vince looks at Donald Trump and says, I want to be where he is. And Trump looks at Vince and says, I want to be who he is.
Wow.
I think if Trump was Vince McMahon, I think if he had the mentality and the mind of Vince McMahon, we'd all be really fucked.
Yeah.
It's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Andy's got a game that we want to get to, and so but we want to ask some questions.
No. This has been fascinating.
And that's why Andy asked the question, like specifically because he wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting to see just if.
Oh yeah, like what happens now?
Yeah, what happens now with everything going on if Vince McMahon and Linda McMahon and the family stay as close to Trump, if they look to disassociate. I mean, it'll be fascinating to see where this goes.
I mean, advertisers, I would suspect, will have a large say on the answer to that question. I mean, it's still a TV show. It's still an advertised, based kind of deal.
Yeah.
All I know is Stone Cold gave a stunner to both Vince and Trump.
And only the Vince one looked good.
So here are a couple of questions we want to go through.
Sure.
What is the best wrestling? This is a great question. What is the best wrestling merch that you own?
That I own?
Uh-huh.
Oh man. I recently started collecting autograph cards of pro wrestlers. And I try to get the first thing I started with was like I want to try and get an autographed card of like everyone that I've ever interviewed. And then like the long-term goal is like I want to get a autographed card of everyone I've seen wrestle live that has an autographed card that isn't like a criminal or a sex pest or anything.
No, it's important to like sort of separate those things.
The list has been knocked down in the past year, I will tell you. Yeah, that's a tough one because I've seen like probably, I've probably seen 1,000 people wrestle live. But we'll see how that goes. But I'm thinking just like the coolest wrestling merch I own is probably like photos I have with people, or actually I will show you that this chair that I'm sitting in, I have taped over a portion of it, but it is a Clutch gaming chair that is a WWE Legends chair.
Nice.
This is actually an Ultimate Warrior chair, but I've taped over the Ultimate Warrior part because I don't like the Ultimate Warrior and I don't like what he stood for and I don't like who he was as a person. I do have a photo with him, but
he did make a comfortable chair.
Oh no! So Clutch, a site I used to work for, Clutch did a deal with us, and great company. Can't recommend the chairs highly enough.
I think Clutch is something else.
Right. So I was actually supposed to get a Sasha Banks chair, but I was swindled out of that, and I ended up with the Ultimate Warrior chair.
Much like Bret Hart was swindled out
exactly.
of it.
And I did not screw myself on that one. But yeah, great chair, but I taped over the Ultimate Warrior aspect of it.
This from our friend Sector Cruz, who is not able to join the show tonight, but left this message for us. Please ask Bill who he thinks is the most significant, important wrestler in the last 5 decades. Could have narrowed that down a little bit, Eric, but that's okay. If you got to pick one guy, who do you think it is?
So going back to 1970,
give or take.
It's probably Hulk Hogan, just because he enabled WWF would not have reached the national exposure and would not have changed the discussion about what pro wrestling is without Hulk Hogan. So he's probably the most significant, important, influential guy in terms of pro wrestling history in the past 5 decades. Like I would say it's probably inarguably Hulk. Part of what made the Hulk mystique last so long is Andre the Giant, who is probably like, he was a much bigger draw than Hogan over a much longer period of time because he was Andre the Giant, and there's never been another one, and there never will be another one.
Yeah. I've seen him up close. It really is astonishing. Yeah. Like to see Andre the Giant live. I went to a match that he was at. I mean, this sounds ridiculous. I mean, but it's breathtaking. Like to see a human of that size be able to move at all, like much less the way he did. And he really did have this crazy charisma. Like that Andre the Giant, I wouldn't, I mean, if you said it was him, that would be.
I think that Hogan doesn't reach the heights Hogan reached without Andre, but I think that pro wrestling doesn't change into what it currently is today without Hogan.
Yeah.
By that same token, it doesn't change into what it is today without Steve Austin and The Rock. But the starting point is Hogan. You don't get here. You don't get to where we are now. Vince McMahon doesn't get to where he is now, and WWE doesn't get to where it is now without Hulk Hogan.
But before we get to the game, I just want to let the viewers and the listeners of the podcast know, because we just learned this, learning more about you, that you've written several movies. We didn't know this, but with the Asylum Studio, they've done like the Sharknado franchise, Black Summer, Z Nation on TV. There's stuff's been on Netflix, Sci-Fi, whatever. Your titles include Arctic Apocalypse, Apocalypse Pompeii, The Fast and the Furious, Three-Headed.
Not The Fast and the Furious.
I mean, I'm sorry.
I wish.
Fast and the Fierce. I'm sorry. Three-Headed Shark Attack, and then Five-Headed Shark Attack. I'm pulling up the art for both of these in just a sec. How did you end up getting into this?
Yeah, so I have my undergrad was in film, radio, and television production. So for the past 20 years, I've been there you go. For the past 20 years, I've been trying to be a screenwriter, and it's worked to varying degrees. But yeah, there's 300 Shark Attack with Danny Trejo and Rob Van Dam. And it was really exciting to have written Three-Headed Shark Attack because of those two guys, if for no other reason. But
dude, we interviewed several years ago Danny Trejo for our podcast.
Yeah, I've
thrilled to meet Danny Trejo.
Yeah, I interviewed him at Trejo's Tacos after he had been in Three-Headed Shark Attack, actually. So
Taste it.
Yeah, it's great.
His donut place is also good.
I haven't been to the donut place yet, but the tacos were fantastic.
Highland and I want to say Highland. No, it's not Highland. It's Santa Monica and like
it is actually yes, Santa Monica and Wilcox.
Yeah, Wilcox. I just haven't because I live on the complete opposite side of town. So like
the Honda shop that I go to whenever I get my car serviced is like about a third of a mile away, or maybe a half a mile away, so I can walk to the donut shop, get a donut, and walk back and feel like I've worked off my donut. And the Trejo donut.
It's just been like every time I've driven past Trejo's Donuts, I've been like, I gotta get home.
Yeah.
I when I was getting my undergrad, I started writing stuff with now my writing partner of 20 years, and he had done some stuff for Asylum. He had done a couple of things for Asylum on his own or with other people. And I was several years back. Sorry, my cat is really being an asshole tonight. Several years back, he hit me up when I was about to go on vacation somewhere, and he was like, "Hey, Asylum wants me to write something for them, but they need it like in 2 weeks, and I was hoping you could help me out with it, because the one thing that I've always been known for is I write stuff really fast." So like the quality is up for debate, but I've always been very good at writing things quickly and on deadline. So I was actually Apocalypse Pompeii that we were writing, which at the time was called Obsidian, when we were writing it. And I was really stoked at the opportunity because I was like, I know Asylum movies. I know Sharknado. I've seen a bunch of Asylum movies. They're hilarious. So my mistake was the first draft that I wrote an Asylum movie. What I didn't know was that is the last thing Asylum ever wants anyone to write, with the exception of the Sharknado movies specifically. Asylum does not want you to write what you think an Asylum movie is. They want you to write a completely straightforward, completely by the book, no jokes, no goofing around. They want you to write a capital M movie.
Wow.
Because they want to send this to legitimate actors to hope that the legitimate actors will sign on to the movie. So Apocalypse Pompeii, for example, had not Adam Lambert. The guy who played Highlander on the TV show.
Christopher Lambert.
Christopher Lambert. Had Christopher Lambert, and it had Jonathan Rhys Davies. And so like those are like rad.
Those are real people. Right? Those are reputable. Exactly.
So what it actually ends up happening is, so they want you to write a real movie, and two, they want you to write a real movie with very strict parameters because they have a very strict budget. So like, take all these special effects out of here, take this set piece out of here, because we're not gonna be able to do that. We got 10 days in Budapest that we gotta film. So what ends up happening is the movies are completely straight in terms of the script when they go to make them, and by sheer virtue of like the time crunch, they got to shoot like 20 pages a day. They have a very strict budget. It ends up becoming an Asylum movie in the process.
That's fascinating.
They're like hilariously, Apocalypse Pompeii, we had because you don't, for people who may not know, you don't shoot a movie like starting at page 1 and shoot page 1 and then shoot until you shoot the last page. So they had shot like the ending and a bunch of like late scenes. And after the first week, that we had gotten a bunch of frantic emails where they're like, the director in Hungary really hates this guy that they cast. They want you to cut all his lines out. And we were like, okay, just kill him. Like, can't kill him. We shot the ending. He's there. We had cut out all of that. So we had to we rewrote a bunch of scenes like overnight and shot it off to them. And they're like, great, cool. We found out after they wrapped, they didn't get those pages. They never made it to the set. So there's a bunch of just people like improving and like lamping instead of like, because when I saw the movie, I was like, I did not write these scenes. I don't know where these came from. And it just turned out that they were like, just do whatever, fuck it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really
so that sort of thing.
One more question before we start the game, because this is a great question. Worst gimmick ever, in your opinion?
In WWE or all of wrestling?
I'll pick one. For WWE, it doesn't really matter. Somebody like, for example, Nathan, who has many, something he referred to as, see if I can find it. Oh, go ahead. Oh, here we go. Mantor.
Mantor is bad. Bastion Booger is bad.
The Killer Bees have been suggested.
The Killer Bees are a great game. No, fuck that. No, I will go to my grave saying the Killer Bees are brilliant.
What about? I remember this one. I remember the Red Rooster.
Red Rooster was bad. I would have to say the worst gimmick that comes to mind immediately is the Johnsons, which is a gimmick that was in the very early days of TNA, which is now Impact Wrestling. And it was two identical twins who were huge roid freaks that dressed in head-to-toe, full-body, flesh-colored suits. And they were supposed to be wrestling penises.
That's terrible.
That is.
I have to say, in hindsight, Hakeem the African Dream.
Hakeem was bad. Hakeem
that was pretty bad.
Part of what makes Hakeem bad, but also part of what makes Hakeem good, is that Hakeem was not just like horrifically racist and offensive. Hakeem is a rib on Dusty Rhodes,
yes,
who wasn't in the company at the time because Vince hated that Dusty Rhodes talked like he was a black guy. So he made a fake African white guy who did a Dusty Rhodes impression.
Wow. And by the way, you can tell I cover basketball and like I'm steeped in basketball because I always refer to him as Hakeem. It's like when the one like went back to Hakeem, yeah. Like that's what I do. I, by the way, used to write on the old TNN. I used to write with Dusty Rhodes did a show called
Turnbuckle.
What?
Turnbuckle or TNA?
Oh, TNN, like the old TNN when it was still the Nashville Network.
No, was it Turnbuckle Wrestling or was it TNA? Was it NWA
No,
TNA?
it was a monster truck, whatever kind of show, and he was a commentator on it.
Oh,
I wrote that show when I was in college.
Nice.
I had a signed photograph of Dusty Rhodes for years that sat on my desk until I gave it to our friend Michael Funchess at the station, who was a massive wrestling fan. Anyway,
yeah, I was lucky enough to meet Dusty before he passed. I've met all three Rhodeses who are in the pro wrestling goods.
Dusty Rhodes, but it was always fun. You talk about that weird intersection where like guys like Dusty Rhodes could beat up guys like Hulk Hogan, like in ways of, the great Kabuki. Like even when he wasn't cheating, still managed to figure. Although they should have figured out. The referee should have figured that out. Every single time he spits the green stuff at the people. He says he's not going to do it. He always does. But like those guys, who great Kabuki couldn't have bench pressed 50 pounds, could somehow beat up Andre the Giant. Like that, it was a weird thing. That
I gotta say, like I love the function of a referee in pro wrestling. I think it's elegant and beautiful. And I do love that if a referee does not personally see an infraction occurring, he is helpless. His hands are tied. He is like, who knows how that green stuff got on that guy? I didn't see him spit it. Like it could have been anything. Could have been a Nickelodeon style sliming. Like I don't know what happened here. But I will say, with every year that goes on, we're in the year 2021. Referees still cannot agree on what a catch is, even after watching instant replay. So, like, with every year that goes on, I find wrestling cheating and the fecklessness of referees in pro wrestling to be more and more believable.
All right. So we got a game for you, Bill, and it's inspired by the old WWF. Before the WWE, it was known as the WWF. Until the World Wildlife Fund, who had the name WWF first, demanded that they change the name. The court ended up agreeing with the WWF, and Vince McMahon had to change it to the WWE. The still WWF's mascot is a panda. So with that in mind, we're going to play a game of panda or panda-related trivia. I will ask you guys both questions. You'll alternate.
You like my seg, Andy. When I asked a question before about things that I used Russell Wilson to seg to his nickname, Dangerous. I used that as a seg to talk about the most dangerous animals on the planet. Andy thought that was forced. By the way, Bill, do you know how many humans are killed a year by hippopotamuses?
Oh, it's like dozens, right?
Oh, 500, Bill.
Oh, nice.
Technically
dozens
people a year.
That's true. There are dozens of us.
No,
dozens. So we
terrifying, man.
Yeah,
Brian, I was inspired by your setup. So you'll go first, Brian. The giant panda is technically part of the carnivora order, species that are carnivores. Giant pandas, though, are classified as folivores, which are herbivores that specialize in eating what? Fruit, wood, leaves, or seeds? Brian goes first. Fruit, wood, leaves, or seeds.
So does that count as wood or leaves? I'm going to go leaves.
Oh, now same question?
Yeah, same question.
It's leaves.
You are correct. It is leaves. Other folivores include koalas, gorillas, and the red colobusses. It's a type of monkey, apparently.
I'm an editor, and a writer. The famous panda eats, shoots, and leaves.
Huh? There you go. I had to look up the word.
Are you not familiar with the eats, shoots, and leaves?
No.
It's to demonstrate the power of a comma in a sentence. Does a panda eat, shoots, and leaves, or does a panda eat, shoot, and leave?
Oh, you see, I'm just fine with typos, so I don't learn this sort of thing. Next question. Bill goes first. In the wild, the average lifespan of a panda is 10 to 15 years, 15 to 20 years, 20 to 25 years, or 25 to 30 years.
Depends on people
in the wild. In the wild.
10 to 15, 15 to 20, 20 to 25, or 25 to 30.
Man, this could be so skewed by poaching.
It's the average.
In the wild, I would say 10 to 15.
I'm going 25 to 30.
It is 15 to 20. In captivity, however, 25 to 35 years. Like you said, it probably has a lot to do with the poachers. True or false? Brian goes first. Pandas have a sixth toe that operates as the equivalent of an opposable thumb.
Who is the NBA player who had 6 fingers?
I don't know. I don't know if that's
wasn't that a thing? I'm gonna say that is false. But while I do that, I'm gonna look up NBA player 6 fingers.
Bill, true or false? Sixth toe, the equivalent of an opposable thumb.
I'm gonna say false.
It is true.
Oh.
They have an opposable or a toe that is like an opposable thumb. It's used primarily for grabbing their food, still tied 1-to-1.
I don't know if this is true, but when I Googled it, I got something that said Rajon Rondo was born with 6 fingers on each hand, and the extra fingers were surgically removed.
That happens.
Yeah,
sure.
I have no idea.
Shame he's not on Zoom chats anymore on the Lakers because we could ask him.
I bet he's upset that he had them removed now because it would make his fists more powerful.
He's got pretty big hands for a guy his size anyway.
Oh, thank you, Monty. It was Antonio Alfonseca. It's a baseball player.
Okay.
Also, Frank Tolbert apparently had an extra toe. Thank you. There's a lot of people out there who know about people with extra fingers and toes.
Okay, I think this one, Bill goes first. The first Panda Express was opened in what city in the San Gabriel Valley? Glendale, Pasadena, Altadena, or San Gabriel proper?
I I want to say Glendale, so I'm going to say Glendale.
Brian?
I'll say San Gabriel proper, but I actually think Bill's right.
It is Glendale, 1983 in the Glendale Galleria. And the first, it began actually known as the Panda Inn, which opened in 1973 in Pasadena. But the first Panda Express, 1983, Glendale Galleria.
They built a new Panda Inn, a brand spanking new, really big, fancy one that is underneath the new Limley Center, the new Limley Cinema in Glendale. And neither of them have been able to be patronized by me or most other people because of the coronavirus.
Yeah, as they say, timing is everything. There are different versions. Brian's going to go first on this one of the band Jefferson Airplane, Jefferson Starship, or other side projects. They involved with
One-Man Gang and Akeem the African Dream.
Exactly.
Versions of the same character.
One of those incarnations of Jefferson Airplane had a song entitled Panda. Was it Jefferson Airplane, Jefferson Starship, or Hot Tuna, one of the spinoffs with about half of the members?
I'll go Airplane.
I think Brian's right, but I'm going to say Jefferson Starship.
Oh, you should have followed your instinct, Bill. It is Jefferson Airplane from a 1989 album that they reunited under that name. I don't remember it. I'm guessing it's not very good, but it is now 2-2. Kung Fu Panda had a worldwide gross of almost $632 million. Is that higher or lower than WALL-E, which came out the same year, 2008? Worldwide gross, higher or lower than WALL-E? Kung Fu Panda, $632 million. Bill goes first.
Higher.
Lower.
It is higher. WALL-E made $521 million. So Kung Fu Panda was the number 3 movie in 2008 that year. I believe it was one of the Harry Potter movies and The Dark Knight were the only two ahead of it. So Bill up 3-2. Pablo Sandoval earned the nickname Kung Fu Panda after leaping around a tag at home plate against the Dodgers in 2008. Which teammate gave him the nickname? Tin Lincecum, Dave Roberts, Barry Zito, or Omar Vizquel?
It was Barry Zito.
Barry Zito.
It is Barry Zito. In fact,
fan.
I did not know that, but that was
yeah.
Okay, well, good. I guess
wife's a Dodgers fan. I'm a Giants fan.
Okay, 2 more. How does that work, by the way?
I don't have a problem with it. So, can I have a tangent?
Yes, please. You're a guest.
I was raised by
Wolves.
Baseball is my number 1 fandom. Way more than pro wrestling. I'm a baseball fan. Giants are my number 1 sports team, fandom, whatever. My grandma raised me. She's the one who made me a Giants fan. She's the one who taught me baseball about age 6. And the way my grandmother grew up rooting for baseball and the way that she brought me up to root for baseball is you root for if you're a Giants fan, you root for the National League if the Giants aren't in the postseason. And when I was a kid, the Dodgers were always in the postseason. And my grandma was also a big Oral Hershiser fan. Like one year for Christmas, I bought my grandma a 88 Donruss Diamond Kings Oral Hershiser card for Christmas. So I grew up rooting for the Dodgers a lot when they weren't playing the Giants. So that's how I always just assumed everyone must root for baseball. Like I knew that they were huge rivals and it was a big rivalry and there was a lot of bad blood, but I thought that everyone rooted for baseball like I did. And I was very surprised to find just all the vitriol when I got out of Northern California for Giants fans from Dodgers fans. So I've never had a problem. I root for the Dodgers when the Giants aren't playing them most of the time. So I've never had a problem with it. My wife does not share the same rooting interests that I do, so she does not like the Giants at all. But since I root for the Dodgers often, it hasn't really.
Okay. You sound more like well-adjusted.
It's certainly it's fortunate that you're actually able to handle it, because two people taking it very personally could get rough.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think if we both rooted the same way, I don't think it would work.
All right, so Bill is up 4-3 with one question left, but as luck would have it, Bill, total coincidence, this last question is worth 2. Ooh. So Brian has the opportunity to win. Just this is the way the cookie crumbles. According to the WWF, the Worldwide Wildlife Fund's website, how many times on average do pandas poop per day? 25 times a day, 30 times a day, 35 times a day, or 40 times a day? Bill goes first.
29. This is just an average, so there might be days when they poop 50 or 60 times.
Oh yeah. I mean,
that is time consuming.
Yes, it is. Well, one of the things I learned through doing research is that pandas don't do jack shit over the course of a day. They very, very little other than eating, crapping, sleeping. They don't, and I guess trying to stay alive. But other than that, they don't really do much. So how many times on average do pandas poop per day? 25, 30, 35, or 40? Bill goes first.
I feel like I'm just going to hedge my bets and say 30.
I think it's the upper number. I think 35 to 40. I think they are pooping machines. It's all they do all day long.
So which one?
The person who has to count that.
Which one you take?
35 to 40.
No, I said 25 or 30, 35 or 40.
Oh, and Bill said 35?
I said
Bill
30.
said 30.
I'm saying 40.
Brian with the comeback. The panda poops on average 40 times per day. I mean, I don't know if it's all large. I don't know how time consuming, but yes, 40 times per day.
So like a particularly regular panda might be 45 or 50.
Yes.
That is a lot of pooping.
Yes, it is.
Wow. That is a lot. I love pooping. We really do. I think most of us, if we're being honest, do. But still, that's too many times in one day.
That is a lot. That is an awful lot. But sorry, Bill, tough break on that last one.
We do appreciate stopping by, though.
Well, that's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah.
Anyway, we really appreciate the time, man. This was fun to have you on. Want to make sure people check out your book, especially because there's a lot of people in here who love wrestling. We promised you a great main event, The Unauthorized History of WWE. Came out in the fall. Get it on Amazon, anywhere, bookstores, anywhere where you can find books. You want to check it out.
Your local bookstore. You can get it anywhere you want. Just either look up my name or look up the book itself. We promised you a great main event. It's not hard to find. You can check me out on Twitter, Sundown Motel. I work for SB Nation. Check them out. Subscribe to Secret Base on YouTube. But yeah, a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me on. It was a blast. I will happily come back anytime you want. We didn't even talk about the James Harden trade somehow.
We didn't know.
We got caught up in the wrestling. Plus, we talked earlier on the Land of Lakers podcast with Jared Weiss, who covers the Celtics for The Athletic. We talked a lot about Harden earlier today. By the way, folks, you should be subscribing.
We don't get to talk. It's like this is like the constant push pull. Like we don't get to talk about wrestling, and so and you don't probably don't get as much basketball time as much. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But if you want to have me back on around WrestleMania or whatever, we can do that for sure.
The WrestleMania I remember turned out to be just WrestleMania, like the original one with Captain Lou Albano and Cyndi Lauper. Tomorrow night. Yeah. Tomorrow night, Matt Money Smith. We'll get back to some NBA, obviously some NFL. We'll do Rams and Packers this weekend. Chargers as well with Matt Smith. Great football guest, obviously, and background in the NBA too. Guy knows his stuff there. Friday, all NBA with Aaron Larsoul. Got some great stuff set up already for next week on the Late Night Happy Hour. Thanks again to Bill Hanstock at Sundown Motel, and we will see everybody next time.
Dank you, Nederland.